Preface, The Secret Team 2, 1997. Carrying on the conversation of the Secret Team book, reading excerpts out of the novel of factual information. Real, honest truths about what your government is up to. Like it or not, we now live in the age of one world. This is the age of global companies, of global communications and transport, of global food supply and finance, and just around the corner, global accommodation of political systems. In this case, in this sense, there are no homemakers, there are no home markets, no isolated markets, and no markets outside the global network. It is time to face the facts that true national sovereignty no longer exists. We live in a world of big business, big lawyers, big bankers, even bigger money, men and big politicians, and include women in that. Women are the worst. They utilize their sexual orientation, the way they look, the way they can seduce you to demise societies. It is not to mention they get their period. It is the world of the secret team and its masters. We are now, despite common mythology to the contrary, the most dependent society that has ever lived. And the future of the viability of that infrastructure of that society is unpredictable. It is crumbling. You wouldn't be able to grow a lettuce or a tomato or grow cattle, or even know how to take care of chickens if you needed to. As one of the greatest historians of all time, Khaldun wrote in his unequaled historical work, Muqaddimah of the 14th century, God created and fashioned man in a form that can live and subsist only with the help of food. Through cooperation, the needs of a number of persons many times greater than their own number can be satisfied. As this one world infrastructure emerges, it increases the percentage of our total dependence upon remote food production capacity to the mass production capability and transport means of enormous companies operating under the global policy guidance of such organizations as the Chartered Institute of Transport in London and the international banking community. As individuals, few of us would have any idea where to get a loaf of bread or yard of fabric or how they even make it, other than in some supermarket or department store. And we are all dependent upon some form of efficient transport, electric power, gasoline at the pump, and boundless manufacturing capacity and versatility, meaning you don't even know how to ride a horse or how to saddle one up. Let that system collapse at any point and all of us will be helpless. A cooperating working system is essential to survive, yet overall it is a system without leadership and guidance. At the same time, the traditional family farm and even community farms and industries have all but vanished from the scene due to your corporations of toxic lifestyles for the animals, of filth, horrific conditions, abuse, sexual acts due to your lack of care and wanting to save a dollar. This has created, at least in what we label the advanced nations, a dearth of farmers and of people who have that basic experience, along with that required in the food and home products industries. Furthermore, as this trend is amplified, the transport of farm produce has become increasingly assigned to the trucking industry, which has its overland limits, mostly as applied to the tonnage limits of rural bridges and economical availability of petroleum. And as you know, Saudi Arabia at this time has increased our fuel costs. As a result, something as simple as a trucking industry strike that keeps trucks out of any city for 72 hours or more will lead to starvation and food riots. None of us know where to get food if it is not in the nearby supermarket. And if we do not have a stored supply of food locked in the cellar, we shall simply be the targets of those who do not. Food is the ultimate driving force. Under such predictable conditions, there will be waves of slaughter and eventually cannibalism. Kind of like living The Walking Dead, sort of. Man must eat, and the only way he can obtain adequate food supplies is through cooperation and the means to transport and distribute food and other basic necessities. This essential role is being diminished beyond the borderline. The lack of food supply has already resulted in a form of covert genocide in many countries. Other essential shortages unavoidably follow. As Rudyard Kipling has said, transport is civilization. The opposite is equally true. Without a reliable transport, we are reduced to start and state of barbarism, which we are already existing upon, however you are blind to it. These are fundamental statements of fact. In such a world, the secret team is a functional element of the dominant power. However, you scream out democracy. It is the point of the spear and is either military nor police. Neither. It is covert and the best of worst of both. Defund the police is what Chicago mayor says, and all the other Black Lives Matter, so they can run the streets. It gets the job done whether it has political authorization and direction or not. In this capacity, it acts independently. It is lawless. It operates everywhere with the best of all supporting facilities, from special weaponry and advanced communications, with the assurance that its members will never be prosecuted, the secret team. It is subservient to the power elite and protected by them. The power elite or high cable need not be royalty in these days. They are their equals or better. Note with care, it is labeled a team. This is because, as with a highly professional team, it has its managers, its front office, and its owners. These are a power elite to whom it is beholden. They are always anonymous, and their network is ancient and worldwide. Let us draw an example from recent history. During Senate hearings of 1975 on alleged assassination ploys involving foreign leaders, Senator Charles Mathias' thoughts went back to November 22nd, 1963, and to the coup d'etat brought about by the surgical precision of the death of President John F. Kennedy, when he said, "Let me draw an example from history. When Thomas Becket was proving to be an annoyance as Castro, the king said, 'Who will rid me of this man?' He didn't say to somebody, 'Go out and murder him.' He said, 'Who will rid me of this man?' and let it go at that." As you will recall, Thomas Becket's threat was not against the king. It was against the way the king wanted to run the government. With no explicit orders and with no more authority than that, 4 of King Henry's knights found and killed this man, St. Thomas Becket, inside of his church. That simple statement, no more than a wish floating in air, proved to be all the orders needed. Then, with that great historical event in mind, Senator Mathias went on to say, "This is the typical of that kind of thing, which may be said, which might be taken by the Director of Central Intelligence or by anybody else as presidential authorization to go forward. You felt that some spark had been transmitted, telepathic." To this senator, Jesse Helms added, "Yes, and if he had disappeared from the scene, they would not have been unhappy, because they didn't like him either. He was a pain in the butt. Generally. There's the point, because the structure of power elite, high cabal, or similar ultimate ruling organization exists, and the psychological atmosphere has been prepared. Nothing more has to be said other than which ignites that spark of an assumed authorization to go forward." You mean kind of like how Pelosi killed me in my living room because nobody wanted to do it because they all actually liked me. So she said, "I'll do it myself." However, I'm stronger than her now. Her attempts are now weak. Very often this is the way in which the secret team gets its orders. They are no more than a wish floating in air. This book is about a major element of this real power structure of the world, of its impact upon the CIA and its allies around the world. It is based upon much personal experience, generally derived from my military service from the mid-1941 to 64. U.S. Army, I want you to note how he's very precise. I said the mid-40s, and he said mid-1941, meaning he knows exactly when it started. U.S. Army Cavalry, U.S. Armed Forces, U.S. Army Air Corps, and Army Air Force, and finally the U.S. Air Force, and more specifically from the special assignments in this Pentagon. From 55 to 64, at retirement, I was first Chief Special Operations with the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. All of these duties during those Pentagon years who were structured to provide the military support of the worldwide clandestine activities of the CIA. He was the Chief Special Operations with the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. They were performed in accordance with the provisions of an Eisenhower era. Now, meaning he knew history. He's intelligent, he knew history, he was very smart. Very smart. I mean, I'm like blown away at how intelligent this person is. National Security Council Directive number 5412/2, March 15, 1954. Since this book was published in 1973, we have witnessed the unauthorized release of the Defense Department's official history of the United States involvement in the Vietnam World War II to 1969. He says that you missed the military support of the worldwide clandestine activities of the CIA. He wants you to know that he was the first chief operations during those Pentagon years, were structured to provide the military support of the worldwide clandestine activities of the CIA, which is not what the CIA does. Just saying. Let's see. The U.S. involvement in Vietnam from World War II to 1969, known as the Pentagon Papers, Watergate and the resignation of Nixon, the runaway activities of the Vietnam War, and the Arab oil embargo that led to the greatest financial heist in history, the blatantly unlawful Iran-Contra scandal affair, and the runaway banking scandals of the 80s. Many of these were brought about and masterminded by renegade secret team members who operated without presidential direction, which I told you yesterday. And he didn't tell me that. Well, he kind of did, but not in paper form. Without National Security Council approval, so they say, and generally without official congressional knowledge, this trend increases, its scope expands even today. I pointed out years ago in public pronouncements that the CIA's most important cover story is that of an intelligence agency. Of course, the CIA does make use of intelligence and its assumed role of intelligence gathering, but that is largely a front for its primary interest, fun and games. As the old boys or Jedburghs of the World War II period Office of Strategic Services called it, the CIA is the center of a vast and amorphous mechanism that specializes in covert operations, or as Dulles always called it, peacetime operations. In this sense, the CIA is the willing tool of a higher level, high cabal that may include representatives and highly skilled agents of the CIA and other instrumentalities of the government, certain cells of the business and professional world, and almost always foreign participation. It is the ultimate secret team, its allies, and its method of operation that are the principal subject of this book. It must be made clear at the heart of covert operations is the denial by the operator, i.e. the U.S. government, of the existence of national sovereignty. The covert operator can and does make the world his playground, including the USA. Today, in the mid-1990s, the most important events of this century are taking place with the ending of the Cold War era and the beginning of a new age of one world, under the control of businessmen and their lawyers rather than the threat of military power and ideological differences, meaning the Cold War expands now into one world, because now we have the internet. This scenario for change has been brought about by series of secret team operations skillfully orchestrated while the contrived hostility of the Cold War were at their zenith. The newest versions of the secret team, however, are not intelligent like this group, because they aren't. I'm talking millennial ages, because that's who they're utilizing, because the other secret team are different. They're all like the same, but that is not good. Two important events of that period have been little noted. First, on February 7th, 1972, Maurice Stans, Nixon's Secretary of Commerce, opened a White House conference on the international world ahead. A look at business in 1990. And to let you know, when we talked about yesterday, the movies actually utilize the liaison of secret information from the secret team, meaning there was a movie last night that I watched about Wedding Crashers where one of the gentlemen in the movie is a secretary of something, and they slide in some factual evidence of what the government was up to in real life. However, it occurs as a comedy because it's in a comedy movie, which that movie is something else. This 3-day meeting of more than 1,500 of the country's leading businessmen. This is the Commerce White House Conference on the Industrial World Ahead. A look at business was in 1990. It's like businessmen, scholars, and the like were included with this memorable summary statement by Roy Ash, president of Litton Industries. State capitalism may well be a form for world business in the world ahead, that the Western countries are trending toward a more unified and controlled economy, having a greater effect on all business. And the communist nations are moving more and more toward a free market system. The question posed during this conference, on which a number of divergent opinions arose, was whether East or West would meet someplace toward the middle about 1990. This was an astounding forecast as we consider events of the 70s and 80s and discover that this forecast, if it ever was a forecast and not a pre-planned arrangement, was right on the nose. This amazing forecast and its antidote pronouncements, among which was another one world speech by this same Roy Ash during the proceedings of the American Bankers Association National Automation Conference in New York City, May 8th, 9th, 10th, 1967. The affairs of the world are becoming inextricably interlinked. Governments, notably, cannot effectively perform the task of creating and distributing food and other essential products and services. Economic development is the special capability and function of business and industrial organizations. Business organizations are the most efficient converters of the original resources of the world into usable goods and services. The flash of genius, the new ideas, always come from the marvelous workings of the individual brain, not from the committee sessions. Organizations are to implement ideas, not to have them. As a charter member of the American Bankers Association's Committee on Automation, Planning, and Technology, I was a panelist at the same convention as we worked to convert the 14,000 banks of this country to automation and the ubiquitous credit card. All of these subjects were signs of the times leading toward the demise of the Soviet Union in favor of an evolutionary process toward one world. In addition to the 1972 White House Conference on the Industrial World Ahead, a most significant yet quite unnoticed action took place during the same year when Nixon and his then Secretary of Treasury Schultz established a Russian-American organization called the USA-USSR Trade and Economic Council. Its objective was to bring about a union of the Fortune 500 chief executive officers of this country, among others, such as the hierarchy of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, with their counterparts in the Soviet Union. This important relationship, sponsored by Rockefeller of Chase Manhattan Bank, and his association continues into the One World years. This bilateral activity increased during the Reagan-Schultz years of the 80s, despite such evil empire staged tantrums as the Korean Airlines 747 flight shoot down in 83. Am I in the right one? It is the U.S. tech organization with its counterpart bilateral agreements among other nations in the USSR that has brought about the massive changes of the former communist world. These did not go unnoticed. During a speech delivered in 91, Giovanni Anginelli, chief executive officer of the Fiat company and one of the most powerful men in Europe, if not the world, remarked, "The fall of the Soviet Union is one of the very few instances in history in which a world power has been defeated on the battlefield of ideas." I wonder what could be possible if everybody could work together and be happy. And you battle the bad people instead of this stuff, which is really what the secret team is supposed to be. So they technically could still do the same stuff. But their ideas around what's important is different, meaning power and money and manipulation is what they used to think as an important thing. Now, is this what Nixon, Stans, Schultz, Ash, Rockefeller, and others had in mind during those important decades of the 60s, 70s, and 80s? For one thing, it may be said quite accurately that these momentous events marked the end of the Cold War and have all but shredded the canopy of the nuclear umbrella over mankind. It's true. The Cold War was the most expensive war in history. R. Buckminster Fuller wrote in Grunch of Giants, "We can very properly well call World War I the $1 million war, and World War II the $1 billion war, and World War III the $1 trillion war." They rewrote it. So there are discrepancies in the first one to the second one, but it's similar. The first part was different. This is a fundamental game of the secret team. They have this power because they control secrecy and secret intelligence, and because they have the ability to take advantage of the most modern communications system in the world, of global transportation systems, of quantities of weapon of all kinds, and when needed, this full support of the worldwide U.S. military supporting base structure. They can use the finest intelligence system in the world, and most importantly, they have been able to operate under the canopy of an assumed ever-present enemy called communism. It will be interesting to see what enemy develops in the years ahead. It appears that UFOs and aliens are being primed to fulfill that role for the future. To top all of this, there is the fact that CIA itself has assumed the right to generate and direct secret operations. Meaning UFOs and aliens are what? Real. Finally, we have some factual evidence. I mean, you know what I mean. However, just to let everybody know that I lived out in Colorado. And there's this place called the Sand Dunes. And there's a place out there that has it's not a museum, but it's a place where a lot of aliens are seen. And I do believe that the government has an alien shop secretly over there. And so I've literally driven past it. I will now stop the video and continue on my merry little way. I might take a shower and put some jeans on because I'm not quite ready to get ready for bed yet. I just did yoga and spin, and my head feels cloudy. This was not a challenging read because it was a little bit of what I read yesterday, but it's definitely new information. Sometimes it's good to read things twice through. I definitely got new things out of today's read than the first time I read it. And the last time I read it made perfect sense. And this time I read it, it also made perfect sense also. So if you have anything to engage in real conversation, not judgments. If you have a judgment, then I want you to put a negative or a positive. But if you have a real thought-provoking, informative experience, even personal share, I would love for you to comment. If you have a question, if you have a knowledge in association to the work that I just read, feel free to comment. But if you have a judgment, which seems to be the normal reaction to posting at this time, meaning fluffing ass is a primary activity, do not post. That is a judgment. If you have a fluff talk, you're going to put a positive. If you have a negative comment, you're going to put a negative. We want to keep my page harmonious. We want to keep the information flowing. And I want you to leave this page feeling calm. So the more we have in creative, collective conversation, the more you can create in your own lives. Now, with that being said, some of you are past life reincarnates of some substantial people in the past who are like myself, being suppressed. So if you see this, it's likely you. So by sitting through this whole video, you have now evolved an evolutionary experience for yourself. And I'm telling you, the wrong people are in charge. So Prouty was the right person to be in charge. Because on the ends of his life, he got rid of JFK because he was not a good president. He was a charmer. He was an Obama. He was out to self-centered creation. However, he charmed me too. He was up to nothing except spending money and sleeping with Marilyn Monroe. And then he goes down in history as a hero. But there were factual reasons why he needed to be gotten rid of. With that being said, the reason why the wrong people are in charge is because they're trying to get rid of the wrong people. Meaning there was an attempt at assassination for Trump. Now, peace on earth is possible, but there will always be the toxic psychos until that gets cleaned up. And eventually the secret team gets tired of being the secret team, because don't you get sick and tired of lying to the ones that you love? Don't you just want to go to a bar and just like chill? And then at some point you start sharing stories like Prouty did? And you laugh about it because they were so darn evil. And that one deserved it. See, the bad ones are trying to come at me now. It's like, give me a freaking break. Ooh, that did. Ooh. Just like in any other business, wrong people get into the job because they're, what is it, elbow greasers or something like that. I'm so nice and cold. You should definitely put me in that. Dude, you know, you told me that you were going to da. And that's not really what we need at this time. We need like a good cleanup crew. And you know what to do. And we'll just start with those.